Acha, delegated legislation. There are two words. From these two words, the answer hidden. One word is legislation, one word is delegation. From these two words, if you divide these two words, we get our answer. Delegation, legislation. Delegation, legislation means law making. Delegation, we have discussed, this is one principle of administration. Delegation means when authority holder give his authority to someone else for completion of a work in a temporary manner. It is delegation. It is delegation. So you need to understand this delegation for unit 6. The paper unit 2 ro delegation तुमको बुझिया पड़िबो. Theory should support delegation, theory should reject delegation. So you need to interpret in unit 6. Delegated legislation. Okay, এটা বুঝি গেল delegation legislation. State रो तीनटा organ আছে. Legislative, executive, judiciary. Legislation formulate law, executive implement law, judiciary interpret law. तो law के बनेबार authority अछि legislator. Legislation or legislator parliament, it make law. So delegated legislation, you already know. Delegation means when the authority holder give his authority to someone else temporarily to perform a particular work. This is delegation. Acha, delegated legislation ebe ki kahaku delegate karibo ko? You know there are three organ of state: legislator, executive, judiciary. तो किए काहाकू delegate करिवार संभावना अछि? Tell me. Yes, because judiciary को तो करि परिबो नै, judiciary implement करिबो. So when legislator or parliament delegate its law making power to executive or administration, it is known as delegated legislation. Here the concept of delegated legislation origin in UK and part of administrative law. So delegated legislation origin in UK and it is part of administrative law. Achha, answer me a question. Any theorist name we can mention here? Quick. Any theorist name we can mention in this particular delegated legislation? Because question ଆସିଛି necessary evil delegated legislation is a evil. Who is theorist? Simply delegation रे कहाँ ना लिखिबो? Delegation supported by Golick, but delegation was, yes, rejected by MP Follett. How this give you answer tikki advantage dabo, because delegated legislation is a necessary evil and delegation is itself rejected by MP Follett. Why? What Follett said? Follett said authority belongs to the job and stay with it. It cannot be delegated. It violates principle of correspondence. It violates principle of correspondence. What is principle of correspondence? Authority must commensurate with responsibility. Authority must equal with responsibility. It should not be more or should not be less. Delegated legislation, also known as subordinate legislation. Can anyone say why it is known as subordinate legislation? Delegated legislation is known as subordinate legislation. Why? Because administration or executive is subordinate to parliament in terms of lawmaking. So when a subordinate authority is making law, it is known as subordinate legislation, or it is known as administrative lawmaking. Subordinate legislation or administrative lawmaking. Delegated legislation is an important area of operation by modern government. It is an important area of operation by modern government. Upendra Boxi conducted a study on delegated legislation and found many factors responsible for growth of delegated legislation. Upendra Boxi, an Indian thinker. So, what broad perspective we will discuss delegated legislation? Need of delegated legislation. Advantage of delegated legislation. Disadvantage of delegated legislation, or why it is a necessary evil. 4. Mechanism to control delegated legislation. তারপরে এটি উঠে types of delegated legislation, mechanism to control এଥିରେ তিনটা parliamentary control, procedural control, judicial control, and last ku example delegated legislation which have certain advantage. So this is the structure of your question. মানে যাহা আসু এছাড়া কিছু পার্ট বি आंसर ହେଇପାରେ ଯେମିତି ପାର୍ଟ কোଣ parliament. So this is answer of this question, parliamentary control. So delegated legislation, the disadvantage, তারপরে parliamentary control answer. Delegated legislation is a necessary evil. This is answer. Disadvantage. Answer of this question. Disadvantage of delegated legislation, it is a necessary evil. It is an integral part of administrative law making. Our answer. This need advantage. Hello. ए वर्ष भी यदि किसी क्वेश्चन आसीबो, I ensure that आ भितर ही आसीबो and you माने comfortably तुम आंसर लिखि परिबो जहा आसु क्वेश्चन जहा पचारु. Got it? Yes. So need. Let's discuss need of delegated legislation. चारटा पांचटा पार्ट सबु पार्ट गुटे गुटे आंसर ही पारे 15 मार्क रो 20 मार्क रो. You know everything. You know that delegated how delegated legislation help government in COVID period. Conclusion with that. Example of delegated legislation, ordinance होई परिबा हमें. Need of delegated legislation in modern welfare nation. Welfare state. Welfare state. Modern state are welfare oriented, function in a diverse field. They function in a diverse field. Scope of administration is very wide. It acts as a provider, facilitator, and regulator. So for all this function, administration need many law to function effectively. Scope is increased, dynamism increase, administration cover all area. So administration need law to function effectively. Law is means uh, law is very essential for administration to, and law on administrative law, delegated legislation is part of administrative law. Administration need law in a regular manner. New law, ନୂଆ ଏରିଆରେ ନୂଆ law ଦରକାର. Administration need new law in a regular manner. For example, ଗୋଟେ example ଦଉଛି, cyber crime ବହୁତ ହେଇଗଲା, ତ administration need a particular law to deal cyber crime. ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସାଙ୍ଗେ law କେମିତି ହେବ? ପାର୍ଲିଆମେଣ୍ଟ ବସିବ, law ବନେଇବ, ଏତେ ଟାଇମ୍ ନାହିଁ. ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ଗୋଟେ law ବନା ହେଲା ଯୋଉଥିରେ administration କୁ ପାୱାର ମିଳିଲା, police କୁ ପାୱାର ମିଳିଲା to track cyber crime. ଗୋଟେ ନୂଆ law ଦରକାର ହେଲା କି କାହାର ବି ଫୋନ୍ ଟ୍ୟାପ୍ ହେଇପାରିବ ସାଇବର କ୍ରାଇମ୍ ଅଟକେଇବା ପାଇଁ, administration ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସାଙ୍ଗେ law ବନେଇଦେଲା. ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱରରେ ବହୁତ ଚୋରି ହେଉଛି ଆପାର୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟରେ, ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଗୋଟେ law ଆଣିବାକୁ ଚାହିଁଲା ଚୋରି ଅଟକେଇବା ପାଇଁ, law ବନେଇବ, ପାର୍ଲିଆମେଣ୍ଟ ବସିବ, law ବନେଇବ, administrative law, delegated legislation. And this law, delegated legislation, it is a law which help administration to function effectively. So administrative law. So administration need new law in a regular manner, but legislator cannot make law demand by administration. So legislator cannot make law which is demand by administration. Legislator function for a limited period. Shortage of time and expertise before legislator. Shortage of time and expertise before legislator. Legislator lack administrative efficiency, so cannot formulate a law. Legislator lack administrative efficiency, so cannot formulate a law. Expertise nahi, administration upare bhi knowledge nahi, administrative efficiency, so it cannot formulate a law that suits administration, that will be suitable for administration. A layman approach to law making will not suitable in present situation. In present administrative situation, which is very dynamic, a laymanist approach of law making will not suitable. Effective law require to solve contemporary problem. Effective law required to solve contemporary problem. Parliament Parliament follow a rigid procedure to make law. Parliament follow a rigid procedure to make law. And rigid procedure to repeal it. It also need a rigid procedure to repeal the law. Okay. So not suitable in dynamic environment. Apart from that, good governance paradigm in 1991 it promote decentralized participative lawmaking. So good governance paradigm promote decentralized participative lawmaking. Administration close to citizen and can associate citizen in law making process. Participative lawmaking ensure need based law and solve problem. Delegated legislation fulfill ethos of good governance paradigm. Group 3 conference. NPM. Can you tell how? Delegated legislation fulfill the ethos of good governance paradigm. Good governance paradigm said participative approach of governance. So citizen participation in law making ensure participative approach of governance and fulfill the ethos of good governance paradigm. Minobrook Third Conference 2008. What it said? Participative approach. New public management. What new public management said? Customer centric approach, citizen centric approach, problem solving, need based. So delegated legislation also it fulfill the ethos of good governance paradigm, fulfill the ethos of Minobrook Third Conference, fulfill the ethos of new public management. के बुझी न पारिला पचारो how delegated legislation fulfill the ethos of good governance paradigm Minobrook Third NPM good governance paradigm बुझी गलो Minobrook Third भी if you remember good delegated legislation होची participative democratic decentralized law making. So when administration make law, administration has more expertise, it knew about the ground reality, it can associate citizen in the process of law making, it can make a need based law, problem solving approach, citizen centric approach, participative law making, democratic law making, decentralized law making. So participation, democratization, decentralization in lawmaking process make delegated legislation or ensure delegated legislation fulfill ethos of good governance paradigm. Minobrook Third Conference and NPM. है ना? So DL is linked with this three. এটা পুরা কনসেপ্ট যদি বুঝিব তুমি গুড গভর্নেন্স প্যারাডাইম দেখো বারবার মু যে কনসেপ্ট কହୁଛି তা ପଛରେ এই রিজন ଅଛି ସେଇ କନସେପ୍ଟ ମାନେ ତମକୁ ଯଦି ତମର ଥରେ କୋଉଠି ରହିଗଲା ନା ଢିଲା ତମେ ଫସିବ ଆକୁ ଏବେ ଡେଲିଗେଟେଡ ଆରେ ଗୁଡ ଗଭର୍ନେନ୍ସ ଇଫ ୟୁ ଡୋଣ୍ଟ ଅଣ୍ଡରଷ୍ଟାଣ୍ଡ ଗୁଡ ଗଭର୍ନେନ୍ସ ପାରାଡାଇମ ତମେ କେମିତି ଡେଲିଗେଟେଡ ଲେଜିସ୍ଲେସନ କୁ କନେକ୍ଟ କରିବ ଗୁଡ ଗଭର୍ନେନ୍ସ ପାରାଡାଇମ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ଇଫ ମିନୋବ୍ରୁକ ଥର୍ଡ କନଫରେନ୍ସ ର ବେସିକ ଫୋକାଲ ଆଇडिଆ ଯଦି ତମେ ଜାଣିନ ତାର ମାନେ ଆଉଟକମ ବୁଝିନ କି ଏନପିଏମ ର ଆଉଟକମ ବୁଝିନ ତ ୟୁ କ୍ୟାନ ନଟ୍ ଲିଙ୍କ ତମେ ଫସିବ ତାପରେ ଗୋଟେ ଖାପଛଡା ଭଳିଆ ଲାଗିବ ତମର ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟ କମିଯିବ ସୋ वन और सेकेंड यूनिट एमाने होचंती आत्मा ए दीटा पूरा जदि बाय हार्ट बुझिचो आकु सेही तरह इंटरप्रेट हे जिवो तो दिस इज वन वेलफेयर स्टेट सेकेंड emergency state तो डेलीगेटेड लेजिस्लेशन हमर दरकार गोटे वेलफेयर स्टेट वेलफेयर को पई काम करिवो आ गोटे इमरजेंसी स्टेट अच्छा इमरजेंसी स्टेट emergency situation need law immediately or parliament requires a lot of procedure or parliament require a lot of procedure like need of approval in both house this impact law making in emergency situation अचानक middle of the night you need a law but parliament is not sitting this factor provide the necessary of delegated legislation. Delegated legislation. Formulation of urgent law. Example, ordinance. Article 123 to 13. So this is need of delegated legislation. Need for out heading the three types of delegated legislation. Types. Two types. One is normal delegated legislation. Normal with be normal or special. Normal रे fundamental things like policy making, taxation, security have huge importance for nation. Fundamental things like policy making, taxation, security have huge importance for nation. So, legislator make a framework under which administration make law. This is normal delegated legislation. So fundamental things like policy making, taxation, security have huge importance for nation, and legislator make framework under which administration make a law. Normal. So legislator not give administration a free hand. It just give a framework that you should make law under this. Normal बुझलो तो? Normal. Legislator କହିବ कि ए framework under रे तमे law बना. तापर under normal there are two type, positive normal delegated legislation, negative normal delegated legislation. What is that? Parliament define a particular area where administration can make law. For example, there are hundred of area, 100 area ଅଛି. Parliament କହିଲା ବାବୁ ତମେ 30 area ରେ law ବନେଇ ପାରିବ. Parliament define a particular area, positive normal. बाकी rest 70 you are not allowed. Negative normal. Legislator define area where administration cannot make law, rest area it can make. For example, 100 area ଅଛି, parliament କହିଲା 30 ଟା ତମେ ବହୁ ବନେଇ ପାରିବନି, rest 70 ରେ ବନେଇ ପାରିବ. So in positive normal, administration has less power. In negative normal, administration has more power. As ମାନେ ମୁଁ କହିଲି ତମେ ଏ ଏରିଆରେ କାମ କରିପାରିବ ଆଉ ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଏ ଏରିଆ ଛାଡ଼ିକି ବାକି ସବୁ ଏରିଆରେ କାମ କରିପାରିବ। Got it? So this is normal, positive normal, negative normal. Second, exceptional delegated legislation. That is no limitation before administration to make law. No limitation, free hand. Legislator give administration free hand to make law. It give administration free hand to make law. Hello. So need of administrative need of delegated legislation, welfare state, welfare good governance paradigm, citizen centric law, citizen participation, and emergency situation. Types: normal, special. Normal, positive normal, negative normal. Normal, exceptional. Hello. So tomorrow we discuss advantage. Next how kon rohila advantage. Okay. So need ଆଉ types. Tomorrow advantage, disadvantage, and mechanism to control delegated legislation. It's entire area. What are the advantage of delegated legislation? Disadvantage, why it is known as a evil, and control mechanism, how to control delegated legislation. Okay, so we discuss this tomorrow.